Good morning, everybody. Hey, welcome to International Podcast Day 2018. I am your host, Scott Carson. Today, excited to be here. We've got a ton of great stuff to go through. An amazing lineup of guests join us this morning and throughout the day. Trust me, you're probably going to grab a pen and paper to take some notes just to hang out because you're going to come across some amazing podcasters are absolutely just rocking the market. They're rocking their businesses. They're sharing a ton of great information and helping their listeners, their audience all across the United States. So strap in, grab a cup of coffee this Sunday morning as we get rocking and rolling. Just absolutely honored for those that are joining us here. We are live streaming this across the web as well. For those out there that are not RSVP'd, do so. Click on the link in the description there that you see in Facebook Live, so you don't miss out on all the amazing goodies. Last count, we were close to 400 on the RSVP, so we're pretty excited about the big group. We're also excited about the audience out there as you guys are watching this and sharing this. And that's one thing I would really, really love to ask. If you're watching this online on Facebook Live, take a second, hit the share button. All right, share this to your page. Our goal is to drive a ton of content and a ton of connections more so, not only for everybody that's on this, but for those that are watching. Seeing the amazing amount of energy and the growth of this thing over the last couple of years has been amazing to watch. And we'll dive into some content here in a little bit with some stats and stuff like that. But I think a lot of people are like, okay, I know that I was a little interested in like, okay, what is Podcast Day? And before I dive into what is Podcast Day, I wanted to show you this is a picture of the Icons of Influence. We'll cover a little bit more about what that is later on. I was very fortunate enough to be invited to the new media summit in Austin, Texas a few weeks ago by the guy in the front there, Steve Olsher, who is in charge of Reinvention Radio, probably the foremost expert on reinventing oneself. But there is a podcasting summit of about 200 people. There was 40 of us that were icons that have been doing this for a little while, who've got an audience, who've grown our business, grown our podcast to a sizable number. And I had come across the idea of International Podcast Day a few months ago, and said, I was thinking about doing something, and I brought it up there at the event, and almost everybody there who was an icon was excited to be a part of it. A few people are traveling. One guy's having a baby, which is awesome. Thomas, hopefully you're out there watching, but congratulations. And so we've got a great group of 30-plus icons who are taking time out of their Sunday in 20-minute chunks from all across the country to join us today here this Sunday, September 30th from, like I said, 9:30 is our first guest, and we'll wrap it up with our final guest at 8 o'clock tonight. So 11 hours straight, lots of great stuff, just great people, great personalities in this group, and I'm honored to be a part of it. I'm honored to have them here on Podcast Day 2018. So let's talk about that. What is International Podcast Day? All right. International Podcast Day started in 2014. It was actually started by a guy by the name of Steve Lee, founder of Modern Life Network, and that's a picture of him. You know, I had to look, is that a current photo? But that's what he still uses for marketing. So yes, him and his son, Dave, are still doing their own International Podcast Day. They started it off. They've done 30 hours, I think, is what they're doing this weekend of live stream. They've done a record of 100 hours live stream. We're not going to go that crazy because I know 27, 30 hours, I've done that before. That's a long time to be online. Our version, we are actually using the hashtag Podcast Day 18. If you guys and gals that are listening and watching that out there, would be so nice to go ahead and share that across your networks or hashtag that. It would be great that you're watching it. Like I said, our podcast day is made up of the Icons of Influence from the new media summit. You want to check that out. It's an amazing event for podcasters to really get their audience to get booked and also to book guests on your podcast, if that's what you do with your podcast or looking to do. Steve Olsher, the man, the myth, the legend, brought us all together here who are going to be on here. So we're all connected to Steve through this event. So it's actually through New Media Summit, and we're a part of this as well. Everybody that you hear today is an icon of influence and doing just amazing things, like I've said before. But excited out. Check out our official website, podcastday2018.com. You'll see the lineup as well. Just amazing group of people that are going to be a part of that and their shows and what they're doing out there, like I said before. So there's always goals whenever you put something like this together. What are your ultimate goals when you do an event like this, or you have a podcast. Well, Podcast Day 2018 for us as Icons, it's our focus is our goal is to grow our podcast by gaining new listeners, subscribers, and the all-important review that we love. I usually hear people on their podcast say, hey, if you like it, go ahead and share this and leave a 5-star review. That helps everybody that's checking out or scrolling across the massive amounts of podcasts to see, oh, do people really like it or do people really hate it? So yes, leave some reviews. If you're listening, find some new podcasts to subscribe to by following, Podcast Day 18 as we share their shows. And I'll tell you this, many of you know me from the real estate community, specifically the Distressed Debt and the Note Closer Show podcast. Well, I'm one of only 2 people on here focused on real estate. It's a broad variety of experts across a variety of subjects, from life coaching to business coaching to entrepreneurs to just doing a lot of great, biblical terms or religious. A couple of people doing some religious stuff to share in their journey with Christ, which is great, along with a variety of other subjects. So I think you're really going to enjoy this from the guys at Hustle and Cash Flow. We talk about marketing and business and stuff like that, to everybody out there, to Reinvention Radio, to Beyond 8 Figures. Just a great lineup of things out there. We want you to connect with fellow podcasters and podcast listeners and audio enthusiasts. That's one of the great things that I love about the podcast community is everybody is usually pretty friendly. Because it's such a kind of a growing technology over the last decade. A lot of people that are getting into podcasting are different, and I mean different, have different philosophies on some things. In a good way, they're taking it a little bit step further by putting themselves out there. It's an opportunity for you to really have your own media show or network out there. And it's easier than I ever thought it would be. Our goal is also learn about new tools, methods, and tricks to improve your podcast. You'll learn from podcast marketing and production experts. And the thing that we're doing this, allowing people to be able to ask Q&A if you're logged in as an RSVP member. If you've actually registered and are on the Zoom call, so just watching live, you have the opportunity to ask questions of our icons of influence. And we're going to dive into with each one quite a bit. So we're excited about that. Meet new podcast friends online that enjoy the same podcast as you do. That's one of the great things we love about what we're doing with live streaming, be able to connect with people. And whenever you have 30 people coming together to share and market from different avenues, it leads to one bigger tribe for all of us. And you'll never know who you'll connect with. I have been very surprised who I connected with in my short 13 months as a podcaster by going out networking. Like I said, meeting up with podcasters and podcast buddies, making lasting friendships. Some of the people that I've met in the podcasting space have become really great friends. And I look forward to not only helping them in their business, but they've also been a very big part in helping me grow our business outside just of the No Close Show podcast. Learn about the current state and future of the podcast industry. That's obviously a goal. Connect with listeners and supporters throughout the day. Joining a meetup can create friendships and networking opportunities. This is another big thing I would highly recommend if you're looking at podcasting or want to find podcasting. Go out there. There's a lot of meetup groups, not only locally but nationwide. There's also a lot of Facebook groups that are promoting and doing things. If you're looking at starting a podcast, or looking to tweak your podcast, definitely jump on, take a look at some of those different groups that are available out there, and you'll be surprised. There's some really great nuggets going on, and people are very, very willing to share, because while we are all looking for listeners, different things, I think we all have a opportunity for this huge piece of the media pie, and we're just literally in fragments of it right now, okay? And I know there's a lot of people, I actually asked this up in my group earlier on, of people looking to launch a new podcast, of being able to learn some of the things, the ins, the outs, the tricks, and tips to help make sure that your launch is successful. And that's what we're excited about too, because I know that's important to everybody. When you launch something, you want it to go well. You don't want it to stall out, right? None of us want it to stall out. I can promise you that, everybody, okay? And then, so let's talk about some of the numbers out there, okay? Let's talk about some of the numbers out there that are rocking and rolling out there, the numbers right now, because there's a lot of people always ask me, okay, what's going on in the podcast industry? So there's approximately 550,000, I got an extra zero in there, 550,000 podcasts out there. Out of that, only about 40% are actually active, 250,000 active podcasts. Now, altogether, there's over 18.5 million episodes out there, okay? That's a lot of episodes, okay? A lot of episodes being created, and there's literally about 2,000 new podcasts being uploaded, new episodes each day. Okay. Now this is spread across, podcasts are being shared in over 100 countries. Okay. And I found some great stats that I think you guys will enjoy writing down, keeping track of. You're going to love this. This is the U.S. podcast statistics. Okay. 44% of the U.S. has listened to a podcast. Okay. 49% of this listening is done at home. Okay. 22% of listening is done in the car while traveling. They turn the car into a classroom, which is always really nice, learning or listening, depending on what they're listening to. All right. Podcast listeners are loyal, affluent, and educated. Okay. 80% listen to all or most of each podcast episode. That's a huge aspect. It's a lot more really than what you see on the YouTube and video side of things, where it's a lot shorter aspect of things. But yes, I will tell you this, podcast listeners are extremely loyal and affluent. And I actually start getting emails from my tribe when I haven't uploaded a new podcast episode in a couple days, or especially if I've not done a live video tape one on Facebook Live in a few days. People start like, where are you? Are you okay? Are you alive out there? All right. And listeners, those that are listening an average of 7 shows. Okay. This is great. You can see there, 44% of the audiences out there are women, 56% are men, the podcasters. Okay. And then it also kind of gives you a breakdown how it's grown over the last 8 years. We started off just about 11%. Percent of the U.S. population listens monthly. That number has grown from basically 11% now to roughly about 26, 27% out there. Okay. And you see that, like I said up here, a big chunk of it, 45% listen to most of the episode, 35% listen to the entire episode. Only a small nugget, like 8%, either don't know how long they listen to or only listen to the beginning. And then less than half is only 12%. So you see the loyalty and the connection that you have. So if you're looking to connect with an audience and follow up and share some information, a very dedicated audience that likes to listen from the beginning to the end, it's like having your own show. It is having your own show. It doesn't have to be on TV. There's a lot of ways to get your network information and content out there. So pretty those great numbers out there. 50% of all homes are podcast fans, and that's over 60 million homes. That's a number right there to think about. Now, obviously, depending on what your show is or what you listen to, you may not be in all households, but that's a huge opportunity and a huge market for all of us to tap into. Whether you're sitting on the fence about doing a podcast, or you're not thinking about doing it, or you just listen, hey, if you're listening to podcasts, you're part of a large group of people out there that enjoy this. And I think we all have to consider that while the smartphone is the television of today, our earballs, as we like to say, can listen to a lot of great things while we're doing other things out there. We can maximize our time. And a lot of people listen at work and listen while traveling, listen to commute. We'll discuss that in a second here too. So let's see here. Diving into a little bit more information for everybody. Some more stats for you guys. 4% of the U.S. population is familiar with the term podcasting, up from 60% just a year ago. 50% of all U.S. homes are podcast fans. We've already talked about that. 124 million of the U.S. has listened to a podcast, up from 40% in 2017. Okay. Let's see here. 26% listen to podcasts at least every month, up from 24% in 2017. 17% listen to podcasts weekly. 16 million people in the U.S. are avid podcast fans. They're usually listen to 5 or more podcasts. Okay. 56% of podcasts listen are male. We've talked about that. 45% of monthly podcast listeners have household income over $75,000 versus 35% for the rest. All right. Think about that. For the rest of the population, that's a pretty highly educated and financially funded group of people. If you're targeting podcasters to raise capital for investments, you're in the real estate side, that's a great market to be reaching out to. Okay. 20% of U.S. podcast listeners have a 4-year college degree versus 19% for the U.S. population. Okay. Think about that. 36% of podcast listeners are non-white versus 30% in 2010. So you see, it's a growing audience of non-concussion, which is great. Minorities are doing a great job of getting information out and launching their own podcast, and people are starting to listen, which is awesome. It means we have a higher percentage. I think of financially educated is a great way to look at things. I think that's a big thing. I think the United States is highly undereducated when it comes financially. And I think a lot of people are listening in and starting to get new education, learn new things out there, and help express themselves, not just minorities, but also across Caucasian platforms too. More podcasting stats. 49% is done at home, down from 51% in 2017. This is meaning people are listening more on the go. All right. 20%, like we talked about this, listen while driving a car. That's the same as last year, that number is. So where does it tell you? That means they're listening more on their commute, more listening on the planes and trains and automobiles and the buses and subways and stuff like that. Sorry, I said podcast listeners subscribe to an average of 5 shows. It's actually 6 shows. I have that number wrong. Sorry. Okay, maybe I'm right here. Podcast listeners listen to an average of 7 different shows per week, up from 5 in 2007. Subscribing is different than just listening. Okay, everybody can listen to a show once a month, but if you subscribe to something, that's where you see a lot more stuff. Okay. 80% of listeners to have 7 different shows per week. 80% of listeners on most of all each episode done from 86. Podcast lean on computer went up from 29 to 31%. Okay. 19% of listeners increase the speed and listen faster. They can listen to their show at twice the speed. 65% of monthly podcast listeners have been listening for less than 3 years. Comedy is the new popular podcasting genre, followed by education and news. Think about that, everybody. Comedy. Okay. And then here comes, it gives you a little bit of the breakdown. 20% in the car, truck, at work, writing, working out, walking around, or other. That's how that breaks down and how they listen. Okay. Who, what, where? Podcast listeners are much more active on every social media channel. 94% are active on at least one versus 81% for the entire population. Podcast listeners are more likely to follow companies and brands on social media. Okay. That's a great thing to keep in mind there. I'm just doing a quick check there. All right, we're still good. Podcast listeners are more likely to subscribe to Netflix or Amazon Prime, and they are less likely to be exposed to TV advertising. Think about that. They want to maximize their time. They don't want to watch commercials. More likely to own a smart speaker system like Amazon Alexa or Google Home and listening to the podcast like that. 51% of bottled water households are podcast listeners. That's kind of funny. 57% of baby food households are podcast listeners because they can't leave as much. 53% of beer households are podcast listeners. 56% of juice households are podcast listeners. 54% of milk households are podcast fans as well. 54% of cereal households are podcast fans. That's funny. A lot of people get listening to podcasts while they're having breakfast. 69% agreed that podcast ads made them aware of new products or services. So that's something, if you have a product or service you're looking to sell, that is a huge opportunity for you to share that across your podcast. And that's one thing that we're looking to do a little more of, is positioning our workshops, positioning some of our products, even some of our deals that we're offering up a little bit more so across our podcast platform. Okay. And the biggest thing is, while people do listen to podcasts on Androids, smartphones drive the podcast usage out there. As you can see, 23.9% listen on their smartphone, watch, listen, or download a podcast. And you see, but that number is growing with Google Music Play and some of the other big innovations recently across the podcast platform, so that Androids and other phones have a little bit more easier capability of being able to listen to stuff. Okay. So we have just an amazing lineup of speakers for you guys out here. Really excited to have everybody be a part of this. Just a great group of individuals who are doing amazing things out there. One thing I wanted to open up, if you guys had any questions, those that are listening or watching here, what questions do you guys have out there this morning for us? So the beautiful thing is we have people literally from all across the United States join us today, out there from the East Coast to the West Coast. Just a great group of people that are doing some amazing things. And honestly, of all ages, from people in their 20s to people in their senior. We got a couple senior podcasts